Welcome, brave listener. Prepare yourself. The darkness here is tailored to unsettle. Tonight's tales, meticulously curated, will linger in your veins. We thank you for surrendering to the unknown. Our whispers will guide you where light dares not follow. Breathe deeply. Let the dread begin. Story 1. I hadn't seen Mike in a few months. He'd been buried in work, and our usual weekend nights out had about disappeared then. He called me on a Thursday and invited me over for drinks. I jumped at the invite, but took note of how depressed he sounded on the phone. By the time I got there, Mike had already started drinking and was slurring his words. A dark cloud seemed to hover over him, which got worse as we drank. I finally asked what'd been going on with him. Mike turned darker, afraid. He said it had to do with work. I never really knew what Mike did for a living. I did know he worked for the city in the tech department and was involved with the CCTV surveillance network, but I never knew what his day-to-day operations were, which he began to describe in detail. Mike explained there were thousands of cameras scattered throughout the downtown core, outlying neighborhoods, and well into the suburbs of our 1 million plus city. His responsibility was to categorize and archive all the incoming footage. Most of the footage went into very general classifications and were saved in hard drive farms and identified with a lengthy combination of numbers and letters for categorical archiving. They were truly meant to be forgotten about. It was an expansive task, but Mike designed and built an AI screening program that detected common patterns in footage, then sectioned out anomalous behavior for review. The vast majority wasn't noteworthy. Something like 99.99%. Then there was the 0.01%. The car accidents, assaults, swarming rapes, abductions, murders. Those went into a special archive for use in criminal investigations. And then there was the 0.0001%. They were held in a classified archive and contained footage capturing events that, for all accounts, were unexplainable. This was called the Tartarus Archive. I looked up the word Tartarus after and discovered it was one of the darkest, deepest prisons from Greek mythology. It was said that if you dropped an anvil from heaven, it would take 7 days for it to reach the earth. It would take another 7 days for the anvil to reach Tartarus. It was the place you sent titans when there was nowhere else that could contain them. When Sisyphus was condemned to an eternity of futility and frustration, with a large boulder and a mountain beep. That punishment was carried out in Tartarus. As it turned out, The name was quite fitting to the archive's growing contents. Some footage could be simplified to strange optical anomalies in the camera and coincidences of light or crackheads on a bender through the subway systems. Other footage beep though defied logic. The beep-others beep are what captured Mike's mind that evening. He deep in breaking protocol and bringing hard drives home at night. In fact, he deep in splicing the footage together, capturing and compiling repeat aberrations, and editing them into linear sequences. Mike wanted to show me some. It wasn't tea in a bragging or showing off kind of way. It felt more like the sharing of a heavy burden kind of way. I asked if showing me would get him in trouble, but he waved the idea away. I said, yeah, beep obvious libeb. I want to see what's going on in my city. Mike led me into his workroom, where he had monitors and towers and piles of externals set up. We sat down, and he skimmed through some drives nervously. Then he landed on one. Mike told me this anomaly was codenamed Lincoln Spectre. He pressed play. On the largest screen, black and white footage started up, showing Lincoln Avenue, one of our less attractive downtown streets. At 3 a.m., the camera angle showed the length of Lincoln Ave. As it led into the downtown core, the street appeared empty and quiet. From a side road, a woman emerged, walking towards the camera. As she approached the intersection, she turned over her shoulder and appeared to scream. The woman took off, sprinting past the camera, which cut to a new, wider angle from another camera across the street. We watched the woman running frantically, seemingly being chased, but she was the only one on the street. There was no one else anywhere around her. The woman kept screaming as she ran, and the cameras kept following, cutting between different CCTV angles. We watched as the woman was chased into the middle of an empty intersection. She fell, then cowered as if something massive was standing over her. The woman's neck stiffened, and she began to levitate off the ground. Her body looked like a rag doll as something lifted her by the throat until she was floating 12 feet above the road in the middle of the intersection. Then the woman's head snapped to the left, and her body fell back to the ground. The video ended and went black. I sat shocked. Mike saw my expression and said, "You ain't seen nothing yet." I asked if that was real, if what I saw was unaltered, was raw footage. Mike said all he'd done was put the clips together. None of the content had been touched. He told me he found out the incident ended up being described as a hit and run, and the case was left figuratively open for more evidence to amass, which it never would. The department kept the footage hidden, claiming it was a camera malfunction. No one outside of Mike and his boss had seen the video of how the poor woman actually died, I started to understand the air of somberness Mike was carrying around. Mike started the next video. This one was codenamed Black Crab and was much longer than the previous one. It started in the subway systems at the underground Walkley station shortly after closing up for the night. Walkley was the last stop on the route, and the exterior was shouldered by a new housing development on one side and untouched forest and swampland on the other. The camera was pointed down along the subway platform on the east side and showed its entire length with benches and garbage cans populating it. At the far end, the tunnel was filled with darkness. The lights on the platform shut off and the station went dark. The camera switched to night vision and everything became visible again. My eyes trained on the platform, waiting for something to happen. Finally, there was movement. It was coming from the tunnel. It was difficult to identify what exactly it was at first, as its movements were strange, and the footage was grainy. But it got closer to the camera, and I got a better look. It resembled a human, a man, but he was walking on his hands and feet, upside down, with his back arched and his stomach pointed to the ceiling. He had long, dark hair that dragged along the ground, and he wore tattered layers of old jackets and torn pants. He moved like a crab, jerkily yet quickly and easily as he made his way to the staircase. The footage cut to a new camera in the dark hallway leading to the stairs out of the station. We watched the crab walker claw up 2 steps at a time and then crawl over the turnstiles and towards the exit. The footage cut again, now showing the exterior of the station entrance. The crab walker squeezed and twisted and maneuvered his body through the locked and closed entrance gate. It looked impossible to accomplish, but he did it. Once outside, the crab walker eyed his surroundings before skittering off towards the woods and disappearing. The footage cut to an hour later and revealed the crab walker reappearing from the woods. He was dragging a small animal by the tail in his teeth. The animal looked like a cat. The crab walker squeezed back through the gate, crawled through the station, and disappeared into the subway tunnel. Again, Mike saw my expression and told me there was more. He showed me the length of the video, which was over an hour long. Mike had compiled over 20 sequences of the crab walker creeping out of the subway station and into the woods. Mike skimmed through the video towards the end, and we watched the crab walker come out of a sewer in a downtown alleyway. It crawled over to a pile of garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Then it jumped into them, and some kind of vicious frenzy ensued. There was someone else in the pile of garbage. Hands and feet thrashed about as they were struggling for their life. Then the movement stopped, and the hands and feet went still. The crab walker's body moved jerkily about. But I couldn't see what was happening. Because of the darkness, and all the garbage bags and boxes obscuring the camera's view, Mike leaned over to me and whispered that the crab walker was eating a homeless man. This caused a criminal investigation, as the dead body was found mutilated and festering in the open alleyway. Mike followed up on the inquiry. What he discovered was the crab walker was who authorities believed to be a man named David Fletcher. Decades ago, David had been a prominent lawyer with a family. One Christmas, there was a house fire, and his wife and kids were killed in the blaze. It was David's fault. He lost everything, including his mind. Everyone has a breaking point, whether they know it or not. A place where they bend too far and then snap. David found his. Family and friends described his descent as nightmarish. David lived on the streets, became addicted to drugs, and tumbled into mental illness. The last anyone knew of him was from 10 years prior. He'd thrown himself in front of a subway at the Walkley station, and no one heard from or saw him again. It appeared that somehow David had survived the subway hit. His back had broken and healed strangely, causing him to move the way he did. He adapted to the new posture and lived in the darkness of the subway tunnels, finding sustenance from drain water and the wild animals he caught. That was what Mike found out, at least. But then he said beep that beep was just the answer the investigators gave in discovery. Who knows where the truth lay? Mike said there was always an answer for the videos he saw. Whether the answers were true or not, no one knew. But the ones that had to become public all needed explanations, however absurd. Either way, David was never found. And didn't he reappear on the subway footage mic? Plugged a new hard drive in. He poured a fresh drink and told me this was the one that was troubling him. The file was code-named Cloud Mirror. I wasn't sure I wanted to see it. But before I could object, Mike pressed play. All the monitors lit up with footage from different intersections downtown. On the exact date and time as each other. There were 5 in total. The streets on each screen were empty and quiet. No cars or people. Suddenly, at the exact same time, in the center of the intersections, a small glow pulsed into existence. It was some kind of orb, roughly the size of a bowling ball. The street lights around it pulsed with energy waves. As the orb grew larger, it grew to the size of a beach ball. Then it flashed out. The street lights went back to normal, and the intersection was as lifeless as it was before. I asked Mike what they were. He told me he had gigs of footage of the orbs and had watched them repeatedly. Didn't he know what they were at first? Then they started to change mic, clicked onto the next video. Again, the 5 monitors lit up with the same intersections and time of night. But several weeks later, the street lights glowed and pulsed, and an orb manifested into existence again. It grew to its beach ball size, but then altered its surface and glow. Something gas-like replaced it, growing outward into a couch-sized cloud of dark gray. One of the cameras was closer, so I got to see the small clouds in detail. It looked like a volcanic eruption wrapping around itself. They were large, constantly morphing blobs that curled outward from a glowing center, resembling a mandelbulb fractal as a gaseous-based organism. It was fascinating to see them floating in the middle of the street, so alien to our roads and stop lights and street lamps. Then they began to move, gliding down empty roads. The cameras cut to different angles, following the clouds on some unknown path, zigging and sagging onto new streets and through alleyways. Then they de-stop. The clouds hovered in the center of their intersection. They de-lower to ground level, standing straight up like a large coffin, holding rigid to the shape. Their exteriors continued to shift and mold together, like magnets made of smoke. Something on one of the monitors caught my eye. Down the street, people appeared. They'd seen the cloud and were walking towards it. The group looked beep and fascinated by the floating entity, so much so they were approaching it. As they did, the cloud became brighter. The street lamps around it pulsed. The group were in some kind of trance, staring into the morphing blob. One of the group, a guy, stared into it like a zombie, then walked right into the cloud and disappeared. None of the group tried to stop him. Instead, another one followed him in, and another, and another. All 5 members of the group disappeared in the cloud. Then they reappeared, one at a time. The guy first. Then in the order they went in. Only they weren't stumbling and boisterous and beep now. They were walking upright, using minimal movements. They formed in a perfect 5-person circle for several seconds over quick words, then turned and all went in separate directions. Their strides, arm swings, and speed all matched. Another monitor showed a similar situation with a larger group of people, lost in reverie as they marched, one after another, into the cloud. Each monitor showed the same thing now. People entering the clouds and coming back out. Different. Mike stopped the video. I asked him if he'd shown this to anyone else. He said he hadn't, not even to his one boss, which was a problem, because he had a meeting with his boss in the morning to discuss the missing footage. I asked why didn't he show the footage to his boss. This footage seemed more than serious. People were being replaced by something. Mike sighed and put a new video on. The main monitor lit up and showed a new downtown street. The date was from earlier this week. One of the clouds was floating in the intersection. A middle-aged couple were walking nearby. The husband with a slight limp in his right leg. The couple saw the cloud and were beeped in by its aura. They approached it, eyes wide and mouths open. Both the husband and wife entered the cloud and disappeared. After a moment, they reappeared. The husband's limp was gone. Mike turned to me and said, "That was my boss and his wife." Story 2. After posting my story, I received a lot of messages of people who were concerned about the whole situation. Most messages were just wishing me luck in finding Dylan. But there was one message that stood out. A message from a mayor of a small town that is not far from where I live. It appears that Dylan and his class, along with Mrs. Wagner, have passed through the town, and so this person has sent me the story as to what transpired in his town. The story is as follows. The school bus arrived in our small town at just gone 10:30 in the morning. It was loaded with a bunch of children around the age of 9 or 10. The driver of the bus was a younger woman, probably around the age of 30, who had long black hair and dark-colored eyes. The bus was your standard yellow school bus that was probably only about half full of students. I think when I quickly counted them, there were probably around 23 children inside of the bus. The bus stopped outside of the town hall, which is where I spend most of my time. As town mayor, the town hall is pretty much my home, and my actual house is more like my holiday home. I was sitting at my desk when the bus arrived, and I saw it pull up through my large window that looks out onto the street. I thought it was strange that a busload of kids would arrive here, as this is only a small town of only around 5,000 people. So it was odd that a school bus would come to visit. I decided to head out of my office and go out and greet the newly arrived guests. I thought that maybe it would make their trip a bit more special if they were greeted by the mayor of the town. Beep hello, and welcome to the town of Freighton. Beep I called out to the children and the woman standing with them. Beep, we are honored to have you here. Beep, the woman who was with the group, who I had assumed was their teacher, walked over to me and put out her hand to shake mine. I took her hand, shook it, and I introduced myself. She then replied that it was nice to meet me, and she told me that her name was Mrs. Wagner. She then turned around to the class and said, "Beep, okay, class. Would you all say good morning to the mayor of this town? Beep, beep, good morning, mayor." Beep, all of the students responded in a monotone manner. In perfect unison, all of the students were standing in a perfectly straight line, all staring towards me. Their eyes seemed a little strange, almost like they were emotionless, or maybe even lifeless. I was a bit taken aback by how they were all looking at me and the way that they spoke, in monotone voices and at the exact same time. I first thought that maybe they were taught how to respond in the same way at the same time. But even then, I thought that that was a weird thing to teach children. Beep, can anyone tell me why you are here today? Visiting the lovely town of Freyton. Beep, I asked the class, trying to see if anyone the students would respond in a different manner than before. There was silence for a few moments before a young girl, near the end of the line, raised her hand. And when I acknowledged her raised hand, she said, "Beep, Mrs. Wagner is taking us to meet our new parents." Beep, she spoke once again in a monotone voice, and almost like she was reading from a script. I didn't know how to react to this, but just after the little girl had finished speaking, Mrs. Wagner quickly let out a short laugh and said, "Beep, what she means is, we are going on a camp to a small retreat, and I have told them that while we are there, the owners of the retreat will be like their parents. They will need to listen to them and do what they say and follow all of their instructions. Isn't that right, class?" Beep, beep, yes, Mrs. Wagner. Beep, all the students responded, once again in perfect unison. I was very confused at this point, but tried my best to keep smiling and making the class feel welcome. I told them all to enjoy their time in our small town, and that I hoped they had a wonderful stay at their camp. Mrs. Wagner thanked me for my time and for greeting them before I left, and the class went about their business. Mrs. Wagner and her class ended up staying in Freyton for about 2 hours. I am not exactly sure what they did in those 2 hours, as I was too busy working. But when they all came back to the bus, all of the children were dressed differently. They were now all dressed in a fairly olden-day clothes. The girls were in plain dresses, and the boys were in robes. Both the dresses and robes were a light blue color, and on their heads they were wearing a small, pointed hat. This was very strange. I hadn't ever seen a group of children dress this way before. I didn't really know what to think. Maybe this had something to do with the camp, or maybe the kids were forced to dress this way. I don't really know. I'll be honest. I didn't really think about the class and Mrs. Wagner after they had boarded the bus and driven out of town, I had been distracted by a large amount of work that had been piling up throughout the day. So I was too busy to even give them a second thought. It wasn't tea until 2 days later, when they returned to the town, that I once again gave them any more attention. The school bus arrived late at night. I was still in my office after a long day when I heard the sound of a bus breaking from outside of the town hall. I looked up at the clock on my wall, and it read 10:37. This was too late for a bus to be arriving in the town. And so I went over to window and pulled back the closed curtains to look outside the window. I saw the same school bus that had been here a few days ago, parked out the front of the town hall. Once again, I saw that it was still full of children, and I recognized the driver, Mrs. Wagner. I was a bit concerned as to what they were doing back in Freyton so late at night. So I left my office and walked down the main corridor of the town hall and outside to see what they were doing here. Once I got outside, however, I saw that the entire bus was deserted, and there was no one to be seen. It had only been 3 minutes or so since I left my office until I got outside. So they must have gotten off of the bus and dispersed quite quickly. I had a quick look around to see if I could see anyone, but there was no one in the vicinity to be seen. I thought maybe they had all gone to the small motel that is down the road. It was the only place in this town that provides accommodation. So I guessed that that is probably where they had gone to. They had just gone there in a bit of a rush. I was still concerned at this point and still wanted to find them. So I decided that I would head down to the motel and see if they were there. I started the 5-minute walk down to the hotel. I turned off of the street that the town hall is located on and walked past a few houses before turning down the next street, the street that the motel is on. As I turned down this street, I saw the group of kids, all standing in a circle, standing around something. The teacher, Mrs. Wagner, was nowhere to be seen. I quickly walked over to them to see what they were standing around, and that is when I saw her, Mrs. Wagner. She was lying on the ground, covered in blood, a knife laying down next to her. I think she was still alive, and the students were all just staring at her. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I needed to help her. I pushed past the kids in the circle and bent down to help the woman on the ground. Beep, what happened to her? Beep, I called out to the children standing in the circle. I needed to know what had happened. No one was responding at first, but as I was pulling out my phone to call the ambulance, one of the kids spoke. Beep, she is a gift for our new parents. Beep, the same girl that responded to me. before replied I, didn't he know what that meant? And I was about to ask more questions when I felt a sharp pain in the side of my neck. I quickly turned to see what had caused it, and I saw a needle poking out. One of the kids still holding the other end of it. Everything started to go dark and fuzzy, and the last thing I remember was one of the kids walking over to me, and forcing my eyes closed I was found about 4 hours later on the residents of the town, walking home from the pub. They managed to wake me, and even though they were a bit beep, managed to get me to the police station that was down the road. I have told the police everything that I experienced, and they have told me that they will do their best to find out what has happened to these kids and what happened to their teacher. The school bus was still parked out the front of the town hall, but all of the kids have disappeared. One witness misses. Gillen happened to look out of her window at around midnight after hearing a group of people walking nearby, and she said that she saw a group of young children walking down the main road that leads out of town. She says that she saw a very large figure walking at the front, and the children all walking behind this figure in a perfectly straight line. She claims the figure was holding the body of a woman, and she described the figure as a silhouette that almost didn't he look human. That is the only information that I can provide at the moment. But I will post any updates if I learn any more about this increasingly disturbing situation. Story 3. The cicadas screamed the night we found the door. Emma S.'s son had been sleepwalking again. She'd hear the creak of his bedroom door at 2:17 a.m. Exactly every night for a week, his bare feet dragging across the warped floorboards of their new rental house. She'd follow the sound downstairs, past the stack of still unpacked moving boxes, to find him standing in the overgrown backyard, face tilted toward the woods. Always the woods. Jake, she whispered tonight, gripping the cold doorframe. Moonlight carved his 13-year-old silhouette into something sharp-edged and alien. Come back inside. The trees rustled despite the windless air. They re-singing, Jake murmured. His voice had developed a rasp since the move, a gritty texture that made Emma S. molars ache. Can't you hear it? She heard only the cicadas, that shrill, sawtooth hum drilling into her temples. The realtor, hadn't he mentioned the noise? Hadn't he mentioned a lot of things? Like the red door. It stood half swallowed by blackberry brambles at the tree line. Its peeling vermilion paint glowing faintly in the dark. Emma was certain it hadn't he been there yesterday. The doorframe held no walls, no structure, just a freestanding threshold between two pines. A keyhole crusted with verdigris stared back at her. Jake. She tried again, louder. Her breath plumed in the July heat. He took a step toward the woods. She lunged, grabbing his wrist. His skin burned fever-hot and damp, like meat left in the sun. When he turned, his eyes reflected the moonlight in twin crescents along the bottom of his irises. Cataracts, she told herself as she pulled him inside. Stress-induced, needs an optometrist. Add it to the list. The door wasn't there in the morning. The previous tenants left their smells behind. Mildew under the stairs. Garlic and regret soaked into the kitchen walls. Emma scrubbed until her knuckles bled, trying to erase the lingering sense of being an intruder in someone else's tragedy. Mrs. Voss brought cookies, Jake said on the fourth day. He stood in the kitchen doorway, holding a chipped Tupperware container. Shoulders hunched beneath his Joy Division t-shirt. The neighbor S offerings smelled of burnt sugar and Earl Grey. What do you tell her? That dada's gone. She already knew. Emma S. Sponge gouged the countertop grout. The divorce papers had arrived that morning. Signed in Richard S. aggressive cursive. Petitioner shall have sole custody. As if Jake were a parcel he'd forgotten to return. Jake set the cookies down. A black thread dangled from his sleeve. She says we shouldn't go into the woods. There's what? He plucked at the thread. Rot. Emma dreamed of teeth that night. Not animal fangs or jagged shards, but perfect human molars floating in dark water. They clicked together like castanets, forming words. When she woke, her pillowcase was damp with saliva. Mrs. Voss arrived at noon with a casserole dish, and eyes the color of old bruises. Her gaze lingered on Jake's bedroom window as Emma invited her in. He at the library. Emma lied. In truth, Jake had taken to hiding in the crawlspace, muttering about the hum. She stopped asking. The old woman's casserole sat between them, congealing. You want to leave before September. We signed a year's lease. Leases can burn. Mrs. Voss's knuckles whitened around her teacup. Outside, the cicadas' song hit a fever pitch. They re louder this summer. Hungrier. Should V stayed dormant, but your boy Emma stood. Thank you for the food. His father S not coming back. Is he? The question slithered across the table. Abandonment makes tender meat. The front door slammed on its own. Jake stopped eating. Emma found the Lunchables and granola bars. She packed him rotting behind his dresser, crawling with fat white larvae. His jeans hung loose, and his hair fell out in clumps. When she touched his forehead, he recoiled. You recoiled, he hissed. Her hands felt normal, warm, alive. The red door reappeared on the 8th night. This time, Jake reached it. Emma woke to silence. No creaking floorboards, no cicadas. Just a thick, velvety absence of sound that pressed against her eardrums. She found the back door wide open, screen torn where Jake had clawed through. The woods swallowed her bare feet. Brambles drew blood, but the pain felt distant, muffled. The red door stood open now, revealing nothing but more darkness beyond. From its threshold hung strands of sticky black thread, vibrating as though plucked. Jake. Her voice died inches from her lips. Something moved in the underbrush, a sinuous ripple of shadows. Not one shape, but many, flowing over and through each other like eels in a tide pool. Their whispers coated her skin. Mother, 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 Emma ran. The police found Jake at dawn, curled in a fetal position at the base of a lightning-struck oak. His t-shirt was inside out. His eyes, when they fluttered open, were entirely white. Pupils dilated. The EMT noted. Probably temporary. Emma rode in the ambulance, clutching Jake's limp hand. His palm left wet marks on her skin. At the hospital, a social worker asked about bruises, about the black substance under Jake's nails that dissolved before it could be sampled, about why Emma hadn't he reported the sleepwalking. He's been through trauma. She repeated until they let her take him home. The red door watched from the woods as they pulled into the driveway. Jake's voice returned first. They showed me the tunnels, he said over chicken noodle soup. His pupils had shrunk to pinpricks. Everything else connected. The lake, the school, the church, even Dad's new apartment. Emma froze. She'd never mentioned Richard's new place. They want us to play. Jake's spoon clinked against the bowl. But the rules keep changing. That night, Emma Googled Cedar Hollow disappearances. The articles glowed on her laptop. Local boy vanishes during church picnic, 1987. Search continues for missing girl. 1999 police suspect drowning in latest 7 children. All gone within 6 weeks of moving to town. All last seen near Willow Lake. All from rental homes owned by Voss Properties. The crawlspace door swung open at 3 a.m. Emma followed the sound. Phone flashlight revealing Jake's sneaker prints in the dust. They led to the far wall, where something glinted, a rusted key dangling from a nail. The key fit the red door. She knew because she tried it at dawn. Her hands steady as she turned the lock. The door opened onto a descending staircase that shouldn't exist. Its stone steps slick with algae. The air smelled of pond water and spoiled milk. Jake. Her voice echoed down, down, down. At the bottom lay a cavern lit by bioluminescent fungi. The walls pulsed faintly. Veins of quartz threading through granite. Children S shoes littered the floor Converse high tops. Light up sneakers. A single Mary Jane. In the center stood a well. Emma's phone light quivered across its mossy stones. Something moved in the water below, pale, segmented things that folded and unfolded like origami. A small handprint stained the well's rim. Fresh. She ran back up screaming. Jake stood in the kitchen when she returned, drinking orange juice straight from the carton. A black thread trailed from his lips into the container. "They re coming up the pipes," he said. "Can't you taste them?" Emma spit into the sink. Her saliva swirled black before disappearing down the drain. "Mrs. Voss answered on the first knock. "You knew," Emma snarled. The old woman smiled, revealing gums blooming with canker sores. "We all feed them, eventually. Better the ones we Don T love. The children's sacrifices." Mrs. Voss chuckled. "No, dear. Seeds." She stepped closer, her breath reeking of wet newspaper. "You've seen the roots. Soon the mycelium will fruit." Emma shoved her. The old woman fell with a wet crunch, still laughing as she crawled toward her azalea bushes. Check the lake. Check the lake before sundown. Willow Lake S shore, squelched underfoot. Emma waded through reeds, the water opaque as oil. Her shoes dislodged something smooth a femur, too small to be adult. Then another, and another. The center of the lake bubbled. A shape breached the surface, pale and hairless, its limbs too many and too jointed. It turned a face toward her, blank except for a single vertical slit that pulsed and sang. The sound bypassed her ears, vibrating directly in her jawbone. Emma stumbled back, the melody unspooling memories. Richard packing his suitcase. Jake S. first asthma attack. The stillborn daughter she never told anyone about. We've always been here. The notes crooned. We are the mycelium, the rot beneath the rose. You've carried us in your marrow since before your first scream. Her phone rang. Jake's voice. Mom, I am in the well. The red door disintegrated when she touched it, revealing the staircase. Emma descended with a steak knife from the block, its serrated edge trembling. The cavern walls had changed. Fungi throbbed in time with her heartbeat, and the children's shoes now faced the well like worshippers. The water rippled, viscous and iridescent. Jake. A wet slap echoed from below. Emma leaned over the well. Her reflection stared back and kept staring as she pulled away. The thing wearing Jake's face smiled up at her, its eyes milk white. They needed a door. It said in her son's rasp. Bones make good hinges. Hands burst from the water skeletal, webbed, twitching with anticipation. They grabbed her wrists. Emma plunged the knife into the creature's throat. Black ichor erupted. The hands released her as the knot Jake shrieked. A sound like glass breaking underwater. She ran, the walls weeping thick fluid that burned her skin. The crawlspace key vanished. So did Mrs. Voss. Jake returned at twilight, damp and shivering, pupils restored. He ate 2 helpings of lasagna, laughing when Emma cried, "I am fine, Mom." Just fell asleep in the woods. But that night, as Emma hovered outside his room, she heard it a wet, clicking purr beneath his breath, and when he turned in bed, the moonlight caught his eyes just so 2 crescent mirrors in each iris. The cicadas stopped screaming the next day. In the silence, Emma hears it the distant creak of hinges. The lake hasn't frozen despite the first frost. Sometimes, at the edge of her vision, the trees seem to step closer. Jake hums as he sets the table, his fingers leaving faint black smudges on the silverware. When he smiles, Emma counts his teeth. She's up to 34, and in the woods, just past the crumbling remains of the red door, a new sapling pushes through the soil. Its bark glistens red. Its roots twitch hungrily. The mycelium fruits in September. Story 4. The wallpaper breathed. Clara pressed her palm flat against the floral pattern. Once cheerful yellow daisies, now stained nicotine brown at the seams. The vines beneath her fingers expanded and contracted in time with her own ragged breaths. She counted them, as Dr. Voss had taught her. 1, 2, 3. But the 7th vine split open like a suture popping, oozing black sap that smelled of burnt hair and hospital antiseptic. "Not real," she whispered to the empty hallway. The words left frost on the air, despite August's swelter. Her phone buzzed in the pocket of Evelyn's cardigan. The gray cashmere one her twin had been wearing when they fished her out of the quarry. Clara answered without checking the screen. Only one person called this early. "Did you take your pills?" Mom's voice crackled through decades of Virginia Slims and single malt regrets. Like clockwork, Clara watched the black sap crawl toward the baseboard. It left blistered paint in its wake. Just organizing Evie's don't. Clara traced the water stain on the ceiling above the stairs. It had appeared the night after the funeral, spreading faster than any leak could explain. Now it pulsed like a Rorschach heart, dripping fat crimson droplets onto the landing below. Dr. Voss says avoiding reminders only delays. Your sister drowned in 3 feet of water. Mom's lighter clicked. You think I need reminders. The call died with a wet gurgle. Clara stared at the wallpaper. The vines had knit themselves back together. Midnight found her elbow deep in Evelyn's hope chest, fingers brushing against something cold beneath the baby blankets. The Polaroid seared her palm 2 girls in matching sundresses, grinning gap-toothed grins, except Clara didn't remember the third figure. It stood slightly behind them, a smudge of gray where the film had warped, arms outstretched to cradle both their shoulders. The caption in Mom's handwriting read girls at Birch Creek, 1998. She dropped the photo like it had bitten her. The house creaked, not the usual settling groan of old timber, but the deliberate snap of a floorboard depressed. Clara froze, the taste of copper flooding her mouth. Evie, her whisper hung suspended. Then came the wet. Rhythmic sound a dish sponge being wrung out. Squelch, drip, squelch, drip, moving from the kitchen down the hall. Clara locked the bedroom door. The knob rattled an instant later. Clara, her bones turned to slush. That voice her own, but underwater, vibrating with the gurgle of a drowning woman's last breath. The hope chest lid slammed shut. Inside, something scratched. Doctor. Voss's office smelled of lemons and false comfort. Clara focused on the psychiatrists. Broach a silver scarab that kept unfolding its wings. Describe these episodes again. First, it was just overlaps. Clara picked at the raw crescent moons in her palms. I'd wake up, and for a second, I'd be Evelyn. Feel the water in my lungs. Then the vision started. The scarab's legs twitched. Now she's in the house. I hear her peeling wallpaper, find puddles of quarry water. Last night, the medicine cabinet mirror showed her standing behind me. Clara's laugh cracked. She had my face. Doctor. Voss leaned forward. The scarab's abdomen pulsed. You told me Evelyn used to blame her nightmares on an imaginary friend. The hollow sister, wasn't it? Clara's throat closed. She hadn't mentioned that name. Classic folie Dieu, the psychiatrist continued. Shared delusions between twins. With Evelyn gone, a droplet hit Clara's wrist. She looked up. The ceiling tiles sagged, black liquid beading along a hairline crack. Are you taking the risperidone? The crack widened. Something glistened in the darkness. The curve of an eyeball, lidless and weeping. Every morning, Clara lied. The journal surfaced in the laundry room, tucked behind the corroded pipes. Evelyn's diary, embossed in peeling gold. Clara hesitated. They'd never kept secrets. Then devoured the entries under the flickering bulb. June 14. Hollow sister followed me to school today. Miss Grady asked who I was whispering to during math. Clara didn't see her, but I know she feels it too. The cold spot, the breathing. August 3. Mom found my protection symbols, slapped me so hard my ears rang. We don't talk about that, she said, but I heard her last night, begging Grandma's ghost for forgiveness. September 1. It's getting stronger. I wake with mud under my nails, my hair full of pond scum. Clara sleeps through it all. I have to end this before the final entry stopped mid-sentence. Clara's hands shook. The diary's margins swarmed with sketches of a figure made from matted hair and shadows. Its face, a mosaic of broken mirror shards. Beneath the last entry, fresh ink bled through the page. "IT's your turn now." The light bulb exploded. Mrs. Peatley from next door brought casserole. Her perfume, gardenias, and mothballs couldn't mask the quarry's stench wafting from the dish. "Awful about your sister." The old woman's dentures clicked. Such a quiet girl, always talking to herself near the woods. Clara stared at the casserole. Carrots floated in murky broth, arranged in a spiral pattern, matching the scars on Evelyn's thighs. "You know, Mrs." Peatley leaned close, her left eye clouded with cataracts. "My Jimmy swore he saw Evie out walking the night she died. Said she had company." The broth bubbled. Clara dropped the dish. It shattered, revealing chicken bones arranged like a human spine. "Best be careful, Mrs." Peatley's good eye rolled toward the hallway. Old places hold onto things. The scratching inside the walls escalated. Clara took a hammer to the plaster, coughing through dust that smelled of funeral lilies. The cavity gaped a dollhouse version of their childhood bedroom, complete with miniature beds crusted in black mold. A scrap of fabric fluttered. Clara reached in, her fingers closing around Evelyn's favorite hair ribbon. Something closed around her wrist. She screamed, yanking back. Her arm emerged slick, with algae. Wrist circled by purple fingerprints. From the hole came wet laughter. The Polaroid from the Hope chest fluttered to her feet. The third figure was no longer blurred, a waterlogged girl with Clara's face. Hands fused to the twins' shoulders. The caption now read "Girls at the Quarry." Doctor. Voss didn't answer. Mom's number went to voicemail. The police found Clara ripping up floorboards with bloody fingers, babbling about something living in the foundations. They missed the writing. Under the displaced boards, generations of frantic script in charcoal, nail polish, what looked like dried blood, all repeating the same plea. Don't let her take your face. The moon hung low and jaundiced. Clara stood at the quarry's edge, stones digging into her bare feet. The hollow sister rippled beneath the surface, hair fanning out like ink spilled in water. "Come home," it whispered with Evelyn's voice. Clara's reflection smiled back with too many teeth. She leaned forward. A hand grabbed her collar. Mrs. Peatley's breath reeked of decay. Not like this, child. The old woman's grip seared like dry ice. Clara stumbled back, screaming. Mrs. Peatley's face slid off in a single wet sheet, revealing glistening muscle and the hollow sister's shattered glass eyes. Run, it hissed through lipless jaws. Dawn finds Clara in the woods, shovel in hand. She doesn't remember digging. The hole exhales cold air, the stench of her childhood nightmares, moldering photo albums, Dad's whiskey breath, the copper tang of Mom's wrists after bath time. At the bottom lies a girl with Clara's face, waterlogged and grinning. Almost time, it bubbles. Clara's hands blister on the shovel handle. Her reflection in the quarry that morning had winked. The pills in her toiletry bag now rattle with tiny teeth. From the house, a phone rings. Evelyn's ringtone. She goes to answer it. Story 5. The wind carried the scent of wet earth and rotting apples as Leela S. tires crunched over the gravel road. Pine trees pressed close, their branches scraping the roof of her hatchback like skeletal fingers. She'd seen the for sale sign 3 months ago, peeling yellow letters on splintered wood, half swallowed by blackberry brambles, and known instantly this was the place, the fresh start, the cottage at the edge of Harthridge Wood. The realtor hadn't he mentioned the eyes they watched from the tree line as Leela heaved her final box from the trunk. Not animal eyes, too still, too patient. When she turned her headlamp toward the woods, the reflections vanished, leaving only the dense tangle of oaks wearing curtains of moss. Her new neighbor, Mrs. Voyle, had brought over a basket of withered carrots and parsnips that afternoon. Mind the bracken, the old woman said, knuckles whitening on Leela S. doorframe when it grows too thick round the property. She didn't elaborate. By midnight, the bracken was everywhere Leela discovered it creeping under the back door vines, thick as arteries. Leaves serrated like teeth. She hacked at the invasion with kitchen shears. Sap the color of motor oil bleeding across her tiles. That S when the whispering began, not from the woods, from the walls, a wet, rhythmic sound, like someone sucking marrow from cracked bones. She slept with the lights on. Scissors under her pillow morning brought hollow knocks. 3 middle-aged women stood on her porch, their waxed jackets smelling of wood smoke and something acrid. For the marking, said the tallest, thrusting a clay jar into Leela S. hands. Inside swirled a substance like liquid shadow, daub every window frame, every door. When Leela frowned, the woman gripped her wrist, calluses scraping skin. The birch folk Don T take kindly to strangers. not since her companions hissed. The women left. Without another word, Leela poured the black sludge down the sink. Superstition. Nonsense. She left her mother tarot cards and crystal charms behind in the city for a reason. But that evening, as she sanded decades of paint from the cottage original oak door, her chisel struck something soft. Finger bones, dozens of them, embedded in the wood like gruesome inlay. Children bones. The Historical Society archives reeked of mildew and betrayal. Leela spread the brittle pages across the reading desk, her flashlight trembling. Census records from 1842 listed 17 children under age 12 in Harthridge. The 1843 ledger showed none. A single footnote: harvest insufficient, tithe unpaid. Outside, the setting sun painted the clouds the gray of old bruises. Mrs. Voyle materialized from the stacks, her breath sour with decay. "They recoming for what owed," she whispered. A skeletal finger pointed to Leela photocopies. "Your cottage, the tithing house, where they stored the offerings." Offerings. Leela's voice echoed too loud in the vaulted room. Mrs. Voile's laugh became a wet cough. "The birch folk hunger every 7 decades. We give them 7 children, bones buried in the walls, flesh left in the grove." She leaned closer. "You've woken them early, girl, scrubbing away the protections, stirring their appetite." The drive home felt different. The woods leaned across the road, branches knitting together into a tunnel. Leela's headlights caught shapes moving parallel to her car, spindly things on all fours, joints bending backward. Her phone died as she passed the welcome to Harthridge sign. They were waiting in her kitchen. Not the birch folk, the women from before, their faces slick, with the same black substance Leela had discarded. They moved like marionettes, limbs jerking as they painted frenzied symbols across her appliances. Too late for the mark. The tall woman droned, but the tithe remains. Her eyes rolled back, showing veined whites. 7 taken, 7 returned. ULL serve as the vessel. Leela ran, not toward the road, but into the woods, the one place Mrs. Voyle had begged her to avoid. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, illuminating a clearing she'd never seen on any map. 7 birch trees formed a perfect circle, their bark peeled away to reveal raw, pulsing flesh beneath. The first touch came as she crossed the tree line, cold, clammy, a hand far too large gripping her ankle. Leela fell, leaves filling her mouth, her nostrils, the whispers wherein tea in any language she knew. But she understood. They were menu items. When the villagers found her at dawn, Leela was kneeling at the center of the grove. methodically stripping bark from a young birch with her teeth. Her pregnancy test positive. 7 days missed lay discarded in the moss. The women nodded. The tithe would be paid. In her womb, something with too many joints stretched its claws. The birch folk always collect their debts. Story 6. The wallpaper had teeth. Mara noticed it on the 3rd night in the Rowan house. Fingertips catching on something sharp while tracing the faded damask pattern. She jerked her hand back, expecting blood, but found only a crescent of pressure marks on her skin. The walls breathed softly in the lamplight. Seams between the floral vines puckering like pursed lips. You overtired, she told herself. Jet lag from the move. Grief making your eyes invent edges. Her son's laughter rang through the empty dining room downstairs. Mara froze, one slipper half off her foot. The sound echoed up the stairwell bright, 6-year-old glee bouncing off mahogany paneling. Her throat closed around the name. She hadn't spoken aloud in 14 months. Ethan. The house creaked. She ran barefoot down the stairs. Nightgown fluttering behind her like a moth's torn wing. Cold seeped through the floorboards into her arches. The dining room stood empty. Moonlight pooling in the chair where Ethan should have been perched to reach the table, where he had perched before the truck jumped the curb, before the small casket, before the divorce papers. A single Cheerio sat in the dust on the seat cushion. Not real, Mara whispered, fingernails digging into her palms. Not real, not real, not real. Her therapist's voice floated through the panic. Trauma reshapes neural pathways. Your mind's trying to protect you by recreating what lost. But Dr. Varma, didn't he know about the whispers? They started after the closing papers were signed. When Mara first toured her ancestral grandmother's decaying Vermont estate, hushed voices behind the wainscoting as the realtor droned about original moldings. A child's giggle, muffled under floorboards, when she signed the mortgage documents at the kitchen island. The previous owners had left in a hurry dishes still in the cupboards. A half-knitted scarf abandoned on the parlor settee. Fresh start, Mara told the empty house. Unpacking boxes of Ethan's clothes she couldn't bear to donate. That's all I need. The walls sighed in response. By week 2, the time slips began. Mara would find herself standing in the attic, holding a hairbrush crusted with black strands, that wherein her auburn, or wake at 3:17 am precisely with soil under her nails, and the scent of turned earth thick in her nostrils. The antique mirror above the parlor fireplace showed fleeting movements behind her reflection, small shadows darting through doorways. that didn't he exist in the room S actual layout. Mrs. Driscoll from next door brought over a rhubarb pie on moving day. Her gaze kept flicking to the third-floor windows. My grandmother said they bricked up the nursery after the accident. Little Alina Rowan wandered off during a blizzard in '38. They found her frozen in the root cellar 3 days later, smiling like she'd been playing hide-and-seek. Mara forced a laugh. Old houses breed macabre stories. The older woman's pastry knife sawed through crust with unnecessary force. 7 families have owned this place since the Rowans. Not one stayed more than 18 months. That night, Mara found the first door. It appeared in the second-floor hallway, where previously there, deep in only wallpaper, a narrow black door with a tarnished silver knob. Cold radiated from its surface when she pressed her ear to the wood. Something scratched back in perfect rhythm with her trembling. It's stress, she thought, swallowing 2 Xanax with a gulp of Chardonnay. Grief hallucinations, sleep deprivation. But in the morning, the door remained. Mara started documenting everything. Notebooks piled up on the clawfoot desk, timestamps, sketches of the shifting floor plans, transcripts of the whispers that now followed her from room to room. She LLC soon enough mothers always break first. We can play now. That Yuri alone her hands shook. As she compared the handwriting across entries, the script deteriorated daily crisp cursive, devolving into jagged block letters. Then frantic scribbles that tore through paper. The dreams were worse. Every night, Mara found herself standing in an overgrown garden where black roses dripped sap like congealed blood. A child's form flickered between the thorny bushes, always just out of reach. Ethan, she'd call, feet sinking into mud that smelled of freshly dug graves. The figure turned. It had her son's Spider-Man pajamas, her ex-husband's hazel eyes, but the face kept melting, flesh sliding off bone, to reveal something grinning beneath the skin. You shouldn't have left me, Mommy. It said with a voice like wind through dead cornstalks. She'd wake screaming. Sheets soaked with sweat that reeked of turned earth and formaldehyde. The house drank her terror. Mold spread across ceilings in Rorschach patterns that mirrored Mara's nightmare sketches. Door frames warped until she had to turn sideways to squeeze through. The thermostat read 72, but her breath fogged the air as she wandered rooms that multiplied overnight, a new corridor branching off the landing each morning, filled with furniture draped in decaying sheets. I am going mad, Mara whispered to her therapist during their Zoom session. She didn't mention the wet footprints appearing around Ethan's empty bed, the photo albums where all images of her son were being replaced with portraits of a black-eyed girl in Victorian morning dress. Doctor. Varma adjusted her cat-eye glasses. Have you considered this move might be re-traumatizing you? Being isolated in that big house, surrounded by reminders. A high-pitched giggle cut through the audio. Mara spun around. Her empty office chair rocked gently. Did you hear that? She breathed. Hear what? The screen froze on Dr. Varma. Concerned frown as the connection died. When Mara turned back, words crawled across her notebook like ants. We were always hungry for new MOMMIES. She stopped sleeping, stopped eating anything she hadn't opened herself, set up motion-activated cameras that captured shadows darting just beyond the frame. The haunting had rhythms, whispers, crescendoing at 3:17 am. Cold spots coalescing in rooms where children had died, the attic, the root cellar, the third-floor bathroom that didn't appear on any blueprints. The breaking point came when she found the nursery. It waited behind the black door. A perfectly preserved Victorian child S-room with a canopied crib and walls painted with sinister nursery rhyme characters. A music box tinkled Rock-A-Bye Baby, despite no visible mechanism. In the corner stood a little girl in a lace-collared dress, back turned. Eleanor, Mara whispered. The girl's head rotated 180 degrees. Black fluid oozed from her eyes as she smiled with needle teeth. Not Eleanor. Never Eleanor. Mara ran. The house stretched around her, stairs multiplying. Hallways twisting back on themselves. Children's laughter echoed from every direction. She crashed into the kitchen and froze. The calendar by the phone showed October 31, 1937, through the window. The maple tree she admired during her first tour stood leafless and skeletal. A Model T rumbled down the dirt road where her Prius should have been parked. No, Mara choked. No, 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 cold little hands gripped hers. Stay with us. Chorused voices from the shadows. Dozens of children, materialized girls in pinafores, boys in short pants, all with that same black ooze dripping down their cheeks. We've been waiting for a mother who understands. Their touch burned like dry ice. Mara stumbled back into the pantry as the horde advanced. Her shoulder hit the root cellar door. She LLC soon enough the voices followed her down crumbling stone steps into earth-scented darkness. A single bare bulb revealed the truth. Small skeletons arranged in a circle, each cradling a photograph. Mara's face stared back from every faded image. Hairstyles cycling through decades. We choose you every time, the children whispered as the walls began to bleed. You always say yes. You always mourn. Mara's scream lodged in her throat as memories. that wherein T. hers flooded in rocking a cholera-stricken infant in 1892, searching snowy woods for a lost girl in 38, swallowing pills in 76, while tiny hands stroked her hair. Cycle after cycle after cycle, the house pressed closer, ribs of exposed lath squeezing around her. She clawed at the earthen floor, fingernails ripping, as she unearthed what lay buried beneath generations of grief. A small hand, wearing Ethan S. favorite dinosaur pajama top. "Welcome home, Mommy." The voices crooned as the root cellar door slammed shut above her. "In town, Mrs." Driscoll watches the for sale sign go up on Rowan House again. The realtor mentions the previous owner left abruptly dishes in the cupboards. A half-finished journal on the desk. At night, neighbors report hearing laughter from the abandoned property. Children's voices, mostly, but sometimes, if you listen close under the winter wind, a woman's broken sobs harmonize with the creaking bones of the house. They always stop by 3:17 am. Story 7. The cicadas screamed the night. The lights went out in Mercy Hill. Mara had always hated the sound of metallic whine that drilled into her molars. But tonight, it felt like a warning. She stood at her kitchen window, peeling back the yellowed lace curtain to watch storm clouds smother the last sliver of moon. The air smelled of wet iron and the swollen creek behind her property, the one that had swallowed Tommy Harlow whole when they were both 14. She jumped when the refrigerator shuttered off. The bulb above the sink dimmed, brightened, then died with a resentful pop. Across the street, the Ramirez family's porch light winked out. One by one, the remaining houses on Sycamore Lane plunged into darkness, until only the crimson emergency glow of the Bryson's security system remained, bleeding through their downstairs windows like distant brake lights. Transformer blue, Mara told the empty room, her voice sticky in the August heat. She'd been talking to herself more since the divorce, since the miscarriage, since becoming the woman neighbors crossed the street to avoid, as if grief were contagious. The first knock came as she fumbled for candles in the junk drawer. 3 measured raps tap, tap, tap on the back door. Mrs. Donnelly, a man's voice, smooth as motor oil. "We rechecking on residents. May we come in?" Mara froze, a pillar of wax sweating in her fist. The county never sent night crews. Not since the budget cuts. Not since the Harlow boy's bloated body washed up 3 counties over, his lungs packed with Black Creek mud. And something the coroner called unidentified fibrous material. Tap, tap, tap. Her bare feet stuck to linoleum as she crept forward. Through the door's frosted glass, 2 silhouettes stood haloed in cherry red light. Too tall, too still. We can smell the lilies, the woman said. Her consonants clicked like chitin. You really shouldn't keep death in the house, Mrs. Donnelly. It blurs the thresholds. Mara's hand flew to her throat, fingers catching on the pendant she'd worn since the hospital, a tiny silver heart, cold as the ultrasound room tiles. The flowers were in the trash, had been for days, crumbling white petals hidden beneath coffee grounds and cereal boxes, because seeing them made her arms ache with the memory of empty crib sheets. The doorknob began to turn. She ran. Upstairs, Mara barricaded herself in the bathroom, cell phone casting a sickly blue glow. No signal. The emergency alert screech made her flinch. Extreme weather warning. Seek shelter immediately. Before the screen went black. Outside, the cicadas had fallen silent. That is, when she heard the wet sounds. A thick, rhythmic schlick, schlick, schlick from her bedroom. Mara pressed her ear to the door. The smell hit first coppery and sweet, like the time she stepped on a nest of baby rabbits mowing the lawn. Her childhood hamster's cage after school vacation. The floral reek of funeral homes. Her reflection in the medicine cabinet showed a stranger. Pupils blown wide. Hair stuck to her neck with clover honey and sweat. The woman in the glass smiled. Mara spun around. Empty bathroom. Schlick, schlick, schlick. She took the baseball bat from behind the door. The wood felt foreign in her soft hands. Hands that had cradled scanned photos and signed divorce papers, and buried a ring in the backyard where the willow tree's roots dug deep. The bedroom doorknob was slick under her palm, colder than the pendant. Inside, moonlight fell through the window in a greasy smear. Something crouched on her unmade bed. You were always going to be alone, it said, with her mother's voice. The cancer rasp still perfect after 8 years, even before you failed as a wife, as a mother. Mara's knees buckled. The thing unfolded itself joints, popping like green wood, until its head brushed the ceiling. It had her face, her scar from the bike accident at 12, her postpartum stretch, marks rippling across translucent skin that sagged like melted wax. We've been tasting your tears in the walls, it crooned, running a tongue too long and too black over what might have been teeth. The house is hungry, Mara. It wants what you promised. She swung the bat. The thing caught it midair, fingers elongating to wrap around the barrel. Its touch left frost patterns blooming in the wood. You planted him under the willow, it laughed. And now its voice was his voice. The baby's father, who said it not a real loss if it never took breath. But roots need more than regret to grow. The window exploded inward. Mara woke to sunlight stabbing her eyes. She lay on the bathroom floor, bat still clutched to her chest. No broken glass. No footprints in the hall dust. Downstairs, the refrigerator hummed merrily. Milk expiration, dates unchanged. Mrs. Ramirez brought over lemon poppy seed muffins that afternoon. "You okay, hon?" she asked, eyeing Mara S.'s unwashed hair. "Heard you screaming around midnight." The story almost spilled out the figures. The thing, the way her bones still ached with cold. But Mr. Ramirez stood behind his wife, staring at the space above Mara S.'s left shoulder. His nostrils flared like he smelled something rotten. That night, Mara dragged the crib from the nursery and burned it in the backyard. The flames turned unnaturally green, hissing as they consumed the maple slats. She didn't notice the willow roots until two late pale tendrils coiling around her ankles, pricking through skin to siphon something warmer than blood. The doctors said it was carbon monoxide poisoning, the sleep deprivation, the trauma. They didn't listen when she described the taste of lilies in her toothpaste, the hollow clinking in the walls when she tried to sleep, the way Mrs. Ramirez's eyes reflected light like a cat S now. Tonight, the lights are out again. Mara sits at the kitchen table, pendant lying severed beside a hammer. The cicadas have returned, louder than ever, through the window. She watches shadows writhe beneath the willow, thick, corded things that move against the wind. Tap, tap, tap. They re at the back door. They re in the hall. They re under her skin. The thing wearing her mother S. smile whispers through the heating vent. "You make such beautiful roots." In the nursery, she swore was empty. Something small and hungry begins to cry. Story 8. The salt-stained windows of the harbinger light shuddered in their frames as Clara Winters dragged her duffel bag up the spiral staircase, 300 steps to the lantern room. The caretaker S. manual had said 300 steps between her and the rest of the world. She paused on the third landing, where the November wind whistled through a crack in the mortar. Below her, the Atlantic chewed at the black cliffs of Crow S. Nest Isle. The ferry Captain S. words slithered back into her ears as she watched whitecaps stab the horizon. Nobody lasts a full winter term, not since the old keeper vanished. His tobacco-stained grin had lingered on the missing persons poster, still taped to the harbormaster S. office. The lantern room smelled of cold brass and decades of trapped sunlight. Clara S. fingers hovered over the light control panel, its switches crusted with sea salt. Modern automation should have rendered live-in keepers obsolete, but the Coast Guard insisted harbinger light required a human touch. Someone to watch the watcher, the contract had said. She pressed the ignition sequence. The great Fresnel lens awoke with a cathedral hum that first night. Clara discovered the journal wedged behind the fuel canisters, its pages curled like dead leaves, entries marching in increasingly frantic script. December 3rd, tides wrong again, low water at 3:17 p.m. when almanac says 8:42 m. Can't he trust the moon here? She flipped to the final entry. January 14th. It S, using the walls. Don T let it the sentence ended in an ink blot that resembled reaching fingers by week 2. Clara stopped winding her watch. The lighthouse S heartbeat, the 4-second rotation of the lens, had colonized her sense of time. She caught herself standing for hours at the gallery railing, tracking patterns in the crashing waves that made her teeth ache. The tides were wrong. She checked the almanac 3 times, cross-referenced with the NOAA website that loaded in fractured pixels on her satellite phone. Low tide arrived 47 minutes late on Tuesday. On Friday, the water didn't recede at all. The first scream came during the storm surge on November 28th. Clara jerked awake to the scent of burning kelp. Her bedside clock flashed 3:33 m. through the howling dark. A woman's voice sliced across the rocks, below, not from the sea, but from the direction of the boathouse. She grabbed the storm lamp. Its beam trembled across the footbridge, swaying over the cauldron of waves. Hello. The wind stole her voice. Is someone? A wet crunch from the fuel storage shed. Clara pivoted. Lamp light skittering over the door, swinging on broken hinges. Inside, the diesel tanks gleamed undisturbed, but the concrete floor footprints, bare feet webbed between the toes, leading to the far wall. They stopped at the foundation stones, where something dark and glistening smeared the mortar. When she touched it, her fingers came away smelling of low-tide rot, and copper the lens began misfiring after that. Clara would wake to find it dark, despite clear skies, the mechanism clicking like parched tongues. Each time, she'd descend to the service room to find the breaker switches flipped. Salt water pooled beneath the control panel on mornings when no rain had fallen. She took to sleeping in the lantern room, back pressed against the still warm lens housing. On December 10th, the tides stopped entirely. Clara stood at high noon, watching the ocean hold its breath. Waves froze mid-crash, foam suspended like cobwebs between the rocks. The stagnant air reeked of dying shellfish. When she checked the tide gauge, its needle trembled at 3.2 meters. She rationed coffee that afternoon, hands steady only because she willed them to be. The journal entry floated behind her eyes. It S, using the walls. At dusk, she found the carvings. They began at the high water mark shallow grooves in the shale. Spirals within spirals, cutting through the fossil beds. Clara followed them up the cliff face, fingers brushing symbols that made her vision blur. The path led to a sea cave, hidden beneath the lighthouse, S eastern footing. Inside, the walls pulsed with bioluminescent fungi, arranged in unmistakable patterns. A language, an invitation. Her headlamp died when she stepped inside. Cold brine lapped at her boots as the cave narrowed. The fungal script brightened, casting greenish light on something embedded in the back wall. Clara S. breath hitched. A man S. face stared from the stone, mouth open in a silent scream. The same man from the missing poster. Barnacles crusted his eyelids. His left cheekbone merged seamlessly with the rock. Tendrils of quartz running through his flesh like parasitic veins. She ran. The cave mouth had shrunk to a slit. Clara tore her palms, squeezing through, tasting blood and brine. Behind her, wet laughter echoed through stone that night. The lighthouse showed her its teeth. Clara huddled in the watchroom as the walls began to sweat. Black droplets oozed between the granite blocks, hissing where they struck the floorboards. The air grew thick with the stench of a trawler S-bilge. When she reached for the satellite phone, something warm and fibrous brushed her wrist. The charging cord had grown tendrils, its copper wires squirming like nematodes under her skin. She fled downward. But the stairs kept turning. Third landing became fifth, became second. The service room door appeared upside down. Through its warped frame, Clara glimpsed the fuel tanks rupturing. Diesel replaced by brackish fluid teeming with translucent shrimp. A figure stood waist deep in the flood. A woman with Clara S. face, skin peeling in papery strips. It needs a voice, the thing rasped. ULL make such a good Clara slammed the door. Her reflection in the porthole glass smiled back with too many teeth by Christmas morning. She understood. The lighthouse wasn't a beacon. It was a throat. The great lends a uvula trembling in anticipation. Every ship it had ever saved now rusted in the creature S gullet beneath the aisle. The keepers, vocal cords, conduits. They came for her at the winter solstice. Clara watched from the lantern room as the sea gave birth to shambling things, humanoid shapes woven from fishing nets and crab shells, glowing with the same green fungus from the cave. They scaled the cliffs in perfect silence. The Journal S last entry burned in her mind. Don T let at the lens ignited on its own. Molten light seared the gallery. Clara screamed as the beam focused into a blade. carving runes into the sky. Her scream became a chorus. The previous keepers' voices poured through her, their stolen breath fueling the lighthouse hungry glow. She felt her bones calcify, skin hardening to encrusting layers of barnacle plate. The thing that was not the lighthouse purred in her marrow when the Coast Guard cutter arrived on New Year's Day. They found the lantern dark, no trace of Keeper Winters, except a single page left in the logbook. The entry consisted of latitude coordinates and a sketch of the cave symbols. Captain Reyes ordered a search of the eastern cliffs, but his crew found only solid stone where the cave should have been. As the cutter departed, Ensign Martinez lingered at the stern rail just before the isle vanished into fog. He swore he saw a flash from the lantern room, 3 quick bursts, in perfect Fibonacci sequence. When he checked the navigation system later, the coordinates matched those in Keeper Winter's log. The system also noted they were 27 nautical miles inland. Story 9. The walls breathed. Lena noticed it on her 3rd night in the house. A subtle expansion and contraction of the floral patterned wallpaper behind her daughter's old bed. She told herself it was the draft from the rattling window, or the shadows thrown by the swaying oak branch outside. But when she pressed her palm against the vines twisting between cabbage roses, she felt it. A slow, humid exhalation through the plaster. They come to Heartwood, falls to outrun the silence. 6 months since the car accident that left the backseat empty. 9 weeks since Mark moved out, taking his aftershave scent and half the silverware. The realtor called the 19th century farmhouse a character-rich sanctuary, which meant cracked wainscoting and a cellar that flooded when it rained. Lena didn't care. She needed rooms that hadn't memorized Emily's laughter. The breathing walls didn't frighten her at first. Grief had hollowed her into something porous, a wind chime skeleton that welcomed any sensation strong enough to rattle its bones. She drank bitter coffee standing barefoot in the kitchen's perpetual dusk, watching sunlight struggle through grime-caked windows, listened to floorboards creak in empty rooms. Sometimes, when the wind died, she heard the faintest thread of music, a music box melody that might have been Twinkle, Twinkle Little Star played backwards. Mrs. Voss from across the gravel road brought a rhubarb pie on day 5. Her knuckles were gnarled roots clutching the ceramic dish. "You've got children?" she asked, eyes darting to the smear of chalk on the porch steps where Lena had idly drawn stars. No, Lena lied. The chalk dust burned under her fingernails. The old woman's smile didn't reach her milky left eye. Good. Place isn't suited for them. she left without explaining. Her orthopedic shoes crunching gravel long after she vanished beyond the tree line. That night, Lena dreamed of hands, small, plump fingers, emerging from the bedroom wall beside her headboard. They groped blindly, brushing her cheek with nails that left sticky trails like snail tracks. She tried to scream, but inhaled the scent of the accident, instead burnt rubber and wilted lilies from the roadside memorial. When she woke, her pillowcase was damp with a sweet, spoiled milk smell. The closet in Emily's room started bleeding the next afternoon. Not blood, something thicker, amber dark and reeking of wet soil. It oozed from a crack in the baseboard, pooling around the tiny rain boots Lena couldn't bring herself to donate. She mopped it up with the last of Mark S. abandoned undershirts, telling herself it was tree sap, though the nearest pine stood 50 yards from the house. The stain on the hardwood wouldn't scrub out. By sunset, it had spread into the shape of a child's footprint. Lena began finding teeth, first one nestled in the silverware drawer, a tiny incisor rolling among teaspoons, then 3 molars in the bathtub drain. They were baby teeth, pearly caps still flecked with phantom blood. She lined them up on the windowsill above the kitchen sink, each one catching the afternoon light like flawed diamonds. When she touched them, her fillings ached. The music grew louder. It came from the walls now, a warped lullaby that made her breastbone vibrate. She pressed her ear to the peeling hallway wallpaper and heard something shuffling inside Not Rats. The rhythm was all wrong. A limp, a stutter step, a dragging sound that ended in wet clicks. Mrs. Voss stopped answering her door through the farmhouse's attic window. Lena watched crows circling the old woman's roof. They cawed in time with the music. On the equinox, the house showed its teeth. Lena woke to frost patterns blooming across her bedroom mirrors, not fern-like fractals, but words. She misses you. The bathroom glass whispered in jagged crystals. The hallway mirror wept icy tears that spelled look deeper. When she tried to flee, the front door handle snapped off in her hand, leaving splinters embedded in her palm. The attic stairs unfolded on their own. She hadn't touched the pull cord since moving in, but it dangled now like a hangman's rope. Wood creaking as steps descended, inch by inch. The smell hit her first copper pennies, and the green tang of unripe blackberries. Then the cold, not winter chill, but the gelid breath of somewhere that had never known light. Lena climbed with Emily's pink flashlight in hand. The beam quivered over trunks full of moth-eaten wedding dresses. A dollhouse with all its furniture nailed to the ceiling. A porcelain clawfoot tub filled with rainwater and drowned crickets. At the far wall, behind a tapestry depicting wolves devouring the moon, she found the symbols. They started at knee-height crude stick figures, drawn in what might have been charcoal. Children holding hands, children kneeling, children with too many joints in their fingers. As the drawings climbed toward the vaulted ceiling, they mutated, faces bloated, mouths unhinged like snakes, shadows pooled in the etched lines, swirling as Lena traced a finger over a figure whose hair matched Emily S. chestnut curls. The music box tinkled directly behind her. She spun, flashlight slicing through dust motes. There, on a three-legged stool, sat a jewelry box she packed away after the funeral. Its lacquered surface showed a ballerina frozen mid-pirouette. Lena hadn't wounded in years. But now, the mechanism whirred, plinking out a distorted scale. The ballerina S-face plastic shouldn't decay, yet the dancer S features had softened, cheeks sagging, one eye dripping down her chin like melted wax. The remaining eye rolled to track Lena S movements. "Stop," Lena whispered. The music sped up. She stumbled back, knocking over a jar of buttons that scattered like cockroaches. The flashlight died. In the sudden dark, the attic exhaled a moist, deliberate sigh that lifted the hair from her sweaty neck. Something giggled. Not Emily S. laugh. Close, but off by half a tone. Like a recording played at the wrong speed. Lena S. knees hit rotten wood as she crawled toward where she remembered the stairs being. The giggling followed, accompanied by wet, smacking sounds. "You're not real," she chanted, splinters digging into her palms. Grief hallucinations, sleep deprivation. You're not fingers brushed her ankle. Cold, brittle, twig snap brittle. She fell down the last 3 stairs, ankle throbbing, where 5 icy imprints bloomed. The attic door slammed overhead, severing a tendril of black hair that floated down to coil around her wrist. Mrs. Voss S. pie tin sat untouched in the fridge. Lena ate, it standing barefoot at midnight. Rhubarb oozing between her fingers like congealed blood. The kitchen walls pulsed gently, pushing against her back in a mockery of embrace. "Show me," she whispered to the house, licking jam from her knuckles. Whatever else left of her, however broken, just let me say goodbye. The cellar door unlatched with a sigh. Water soaked through her socks before she reached the 3rd step. The flood smelled of algae and spoiled meat, of hospital corridors and funeral parlors. Lena S. phone flashlight reflected off floating shapes, drowned mice. No, too many teeth. At the bottom, the water reached her thighs. Something brushed her hip long, willowy. Gone before she could turn. The beam of light trembled across stone walls, covered in handprints. So many handprints. Child-sized, some still glistening red. A splash behind her. Lena froze. The water rippled against her stomach in concentric circles. Another splash to her left, then right, then directly ahead, where the light revealed a pale shape breaking the surface. Hair first, stringy clumps of it, weighted down with algae, then the scalp, mottled blue-white, shoulders, a flowered sundress. Emily. The name tore her throat raw. The thing raised its head. Lena S. scream died in a gurgle. It had Emily S. birthmark, that strawberry splash on its left shoulder. But the face, oh God. The face was a hollow, where too many teeth jutted at wrong angles. The eyes were misses. Voss S. milky orbs, swimming with black veins. Mommy, it rasped through a mouth that split like overripe fruit. You left me with them. The water erupted. Hands, dozens of hands clawed at her waist, her arms, her hair. Lena thrashed, dropping her phone into the murk. Darkness swallowed her. The thing that Wasson T. Emily laughed with 100 rotting mouths. Its breath the stench of car crashes and cancer wards, and every lost thing that ever wept in the dark. She woke on the cellar stairs, dawn filtering through cobwebbed windows. Her clothes were dry. The kitchen calendar showed she'd lost 3 days. They came for her that evening, the townsfolk in their mud-caked trucks. The Sheriff S. badge gleamed dull as old nickel. Mrs. Voss is missing, he said. Eyes lingering on the teeth lining Lena S. windowsill. You seem distressed. Maybe you should come into town for a while. Lena smiled, stirring her coffee with a finger. The liquid had turned viscous, sweet as syrup. I am fine now. We all fine here. The sheriff left after 15 minutes of uncomfortable silence. Through the warped glass, Lena watched him make the sign of the cross before speeding away. That night, the house gave its final gift. She found it under Emily S. pillow, a friendship bracelet made of woven hair, still damp with cellar water. Lena S. chestnut, Mark S. black, Emily S. sun-bleached gold. The walls were singing now. A chorus of shrill voices harmonizing with the music box S. twisted lullaby. Lena hummed along as she climbed the attic stairs, following the trail of lichen growing in the shape of small bare feet. Behind the wolf tapestry, the symbols had rearranged. They told the truth, now not in words, but in the language of fingernail scrapes and the spaces between heartbeats. Lena traced the story with her bitten-down nails. Heartwood Falls' first settlers hadn't farmed this land. They defed it. Every stillborn child, every fever-lost daughter, every boy who drowned in the creek. The soil demanded payment, and the house was always hungry, it kept pieces of them in its walls, growing them into new shapes, better shapes, shapes that didn't cry or ask too many questions or beg Mommy not to let go. The attic wall split open like a wound. Inside, the walls were meat, pulsing, veined, studded with milk teeth and baby shoes, and locks of hair tied with ribbon. Lena stepped into the warmth, breathing in the scent of placenta and birthday candles. Somewhere in the fleshy dark, small hands clapped. Emily, she whispered. 100 voices answered. They led her deeper. The floor sloped downward. Though that couldn't be right, the house only had 2 stories. The meat walls narrowed, pressing against her like a lover. She tasted lullabies. When the passage opened into a chamber, Lena understood. The roots, great woody tendrils, plunged from the ceiling into a pool of black water. Each root ended in something pale and squirming, not quite infants, not quite corpses. Their fused mouths opened and closed in unison, singing the house's endless hunger. And there, tangled in the thickest root, my baby, Lena wept. Emily's face surfaced from the rod, skin translucent as communion wax. You came back, she giggled, voice layered with the cellar thing's rasp. Now we can play forever. The roots descended. Lena didn't fight. She opened her arms, her mouth, the hollow places where her bones met. The house filled her with its sweet rot, its centuries of stolen lullabies. When it reached her womb, she finally heard the music properly, not backwards, but inside out, a melody that grew new organs. The sheriff returned at dawn with a search warrant. They found the kitchen empty, coffee still steaming next to a plate of rhubarb pie. Upstairs, Emily's bed held a nest of hair and fingernail clippings. The attic door hung open, revealing only dusty trunks and sunlight. But if you stand on the gravel road at twilight, you might see it a shadow too tall for the oak tree, its arms branching into infinite fingers. If you listen past the crickets, you'll hear them singing. And if your child ever draws a door where no door should be, if they whisper to friends, you can't see, better check their teeth. Story 10. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and rotting hawthorn blossoms. As Claire McAllister stepped off the bus at the crossroads, her grandmother's handwritten directions had specified this stop, not the modern village center 2 miles east, but the old standing stone where the asphalt gave way to sheep trails. The driver eyed her backpack with its peeling National Trust stickers as the doors hissed shut. You know there's nothing up there but ruins and mad old coots, he said. The vehicle dissolved into the highland mist, leaving her alone with the keening of curlews and the stone. Cairn Moire hadn't appeared on any map, since 1843. The path dissolved into bog within 20 paces, the heather clawing at her jeans with woody fingers by the time she glimpsed the first thatched roof through the drizzle. Twilight had turned the hills into hunched giants, a hand-painted sign nailed to an alder reed and Badhian gun shed visitors. Unwelcome in the old tongue. The paint looked fresh. You relate. Claire started. The woman emerged from the gloaming like a mushroom, pushing through loam squat, pale. Her waxed jacket gleaming with moisture. Mrs. Buchanan S. face was a relief map of wrinkles. Eyes like chips of flint. Claire remembered those eyes glaring down at her childhood attempts to steal brambleberries from the manse garden. The funeral was last month. The old woman said, not moving from the center of the path. Behind her, yellow lights flickered in cottage windows. No electric glow oil lamps and hearth fires. We've no need of city folk here. Claire tightened her grip on the backpack straps. IV come to settle Gran S. estate. The solicitor said solicitors. Mrs. Buchanan spat the word into the mud. This is a place of seen D.H. Ig. Old ways. Your blood may grant passage. But mind you, she stepped aside with painful slowness, joints crackling. The Vale S. thin here at Samhain. They LLB hungry after 60 years, without proper tithe. The cottage stank of mildew and mothballs. Claire dropped her pack beside the cold hearth, where Gran had once told stories of kelpies and each-uist. The memory arrived unbidden age 7. Wrapped in a tartan blanket, Gran S. knotted fingers stroking her hair. The owls S. erranty like your English fairies. Mokrid. They re older than the hills. Hungrier. She found the journal in the glory hole beneath the stairs. Its cracked leather binding tied, shut with plaited horsehair. Gran S. spidery Gaelic crowded every margin. Must renew the protection before the last harvest rowan berries gathered at dawn 3 drops from the 7th sun. The final entry stopped mid-sentence. Ink blotted where the pen had fallen. October 29, 1962. The day Gran S. Hart gave out something scraped against the north wall. Claire froze, the paraffin lamp throwing frantic shadows through the warped window pane. She glimpsed movement in the overgrown garden pale shapes, flitting between the skeletal apple trees. When she pressed her face to the glass, they resolved into sheep. Probably their eyes reflected the lamplight like coins. In a well the kirkyard, clung to the hillside like a rotten tooth. Gran S. grave lay apart from the others. The fresh mound of earth, conspicuous among lichen-crusted headstones. Claire placed her offering of heather and bog myrtle on the grave. The ritual feeling, absurd even as she murmured the old blessing. The The wind shifted, carrying a sound that might have been children laughing, though Cairn Moire's youngest resident was Mrs. Buchanan's middle-aged nephew. She tried to keep the old rights, your granny. Claire started. The man leaning against the lichgate looked like a local waxed jacket. Flat cap, cheeks ruddy from whiskey and weather, but his eyes were wrong. Too dark, too still. When the last true believer falters, he pushed off the gate, hands deep in pockets. The protections fray. Can you feel it? A shiver crawled up Claire's spine. The air tasted metallic, like blood on the tongue. Feel what? His smile showed teeth too white, too even. Them. That night, the dreams came. Gran standing at the crossroads with a lantern. Her shadow stretching impossibly long across the moor. Shapes moved in the darkness, beyond the light antlered silhouettes. Things that skittered and slithered. You must finish it. Gran's dream voice whispered as the lantern guttered. Before the spiral closes, Claire woke to the stench of burning hair. The kitchen wall oozed. Not metaphorically thick black resin bubbled between the stones, dripping onto the flagstones with a sound like fat rendering. Where it pooled, the substance quivered, forming shapes that might have been faces, might have been hands. Claire backed toward the door, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The ooze began to smoke. She ran to Mrs. Buchanan's cottage. The old woman answered, clutching an iron poker, her nightcap askew. You let it in, she hissed, pulling Claire inside. A dozen horseshoes hung above the doorframe, each smeared with something dark and flaking. Fool girl, poking at what should be stayed buried. Let what in? What else happening? Mrs. Buchanan stoked the fire with violent jabs. Your gran was the last bean GHL&E, the never of the pact. When she passed, without training a successor, the poker clattered against the hearthstones. The balance broke. They come to collect the debt. The story spilled out in jagged fragments. How Cairn Moire hadn't he chosen isolation? It had been hidden. Payment rendered every 7 years to keep the owls at bay. Not milk and bread left on doorsteps, but living tithes, firstborn sons, twin daughters, children born under the solstice moon. The cairn, Claire whispered, remembering Gran's journal entries about moonlit processions. The spiral carved into the old one's gate. Mrs. Buchanan's hands trembled as she poured whiskey. Your gran couldn't he do it any more, the killing. Started leaving dear hearts instead. Must be worked until now. A thud shook the roof. Soot rained down the chimney. Outside, the wind screamed with voices that clawed at the window panes. Mrs. Buchanan crossed herself with surprising fluidity. They take the whole village tonight. then the valley, then the world. The cairn stood at the center of the stone circle, its mossy bulk crowned with dead ivy. Claire's flashlight beam trembled over the spiral petroglyph, same as in Gran's journal, same as the pendant around Mrs. Buchanan's neck. The air hummed like power lines before a storm. It needs blood. Mrs. Buchanan thrust a rusted sickle into Claire's hand. Your blood. The last descendant of the Neaver line. You can't be serious. This is hush. The old woman cocked her head. Somewhere down the hill, a dog howled. No, not a dog. The sound rose again, ululating wrong. They recoming. Do it. Claire pressed the blade to her palm. As the first blood hit the spiral, the stones groaned. Lichen shriveled. Ancient channels carved by forgotten hands began to glow faintly at first, then burning copper bright. The ground beneath her boots vibrated. Mrs. Buchanan screamed. It came from the east, a stag made of shadows and shattered antlers. Its eyes were voids. Its breath smelled of opened graves. The creature lowered its head, tines crackling with St. Elmo's fire. Claire froze, sickle dangling from nerveless fingers. The church bell tolled. Once, twice. On the third ring, the stag dissolved into crows. They found Mrs. Buchanan's nephew at dawn. He hung from the kirk lich gate by his intestines, face frozen in a rictus grin. His left hand clutched a bundle of rowan twigs bound with human hair. The villagers muttered about suicide, about city folk bringing trouble. No one met Claire's eyes. She packed Gran's journal carefully between her sweaters. The bus stop stood empty. The standing stones streaked with reddish lichen that hadn't been there yesterday. As the diesel rumble announced the coach's approach, something cold brushed Claire's neck. Not finished, neither. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, the sigh of wind through heather, the creak of ancient roots. Claire spun, heart pounding. The moor stretched empty to the horizon, but in the mud by her boots, 3 words gleamed wetly. We have him. The photo arrived a week later. No return address. Her baby brother Jamie, grinning on Cairn Moire's main street, except Jamie had never visited Scotland. Hadn't he left his Manchester flat in 5 years? And the eyes Claire's hands shook as she dialed his number. Voicemail. Always voicemail. Outside her London flat, something scratched at the windows. The security lights flickered. When she peered through the blinds, the courtyard stood empty save for hoofprints burned into the concrete. In Cairn Moire, the spiral keeps turning.